Hi, I'm Rachel.
And I'm Matt.
Welcome to the Strange and Beautiful Book Club. I did it. I finished the book.
Rachel finished a book that I recommended.
I've read books that you recommended
Name 3.
at some point. Oh, you name 3. Oh, you have that band on your shirt. Name 5 songs you like. Okay, I'll name 3. I read Murderbot on your recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
I read this book on your recommendation,
Mm-hmm.
and I read Way of Kings on your recommendation.
No, you didn't. You read it on Kate's recommendation.
You recommended it at some point, and then eventually I read it.
And Kate also recommended it.
You know what really, the real kicker here is how many books I read actively avoiding reading this book. It got me out of a slump.
Can you tell me
It
the
got
number?
me out of like 6.
Yeah.
I think I read Shape of Water. I read an awesome middle grade book called Don't Want to Be Your Monster. I read, oh my God, so many books. Devolution twice. Way of Kings, Words of Radiance, which are like 1,400 pages collectively. Each. Yeah, each. Yeah, a lot of books. I started a couple too, but then I was like, no. You read the fucking book, Rachel. You read the fucking book, Rachel.
All right. So
And I
the
read the
book
book.
is The Quantum Thief
Yes.
by Hannu Rajaniemi,
Yes.
which is book 1 of the Jean Le Flambeur trilogy.
Okay. Is the author, do they have a specific gender
That's a very good question.
that they
Let us
identify as?
consult the Oracle.
Google.
ChatGPT.
Oh.
No, I don't use ChatGPT for facts. I use ChatGPT for shapes of solutions, and I fill in the correct details later. Okie dokie.
Have you consulted the Oracle? What has it revealed?
No preferred pronouns.
No. I mean, okay, great. Like, I'm happy for them, but like, I need a target. Put me in, coach.
Hannu seems to be a male.
Okay. What nationality is Hannu?
Finland.
Okay. Okay.
Although they now live in Oakland, California.
Is it originally a foreign language novel translated into English?
No, it's written in English.
Okay.
They write.
He.
I'm assuming he. He writes in English and Finnish.
Okay.
Both.
Okay.
Which may explain why.
Some of the phrasing
feels a
felt
little weird.
translated. Some of the way that it was written felt like, are you in English? You don't feel like you were in English. You feel like you were translated.
Maybe he still thinks in Finnish.
I don't know. I mean, it's good. It's fine. It's not like a criticism. It's just, I feel like if you've read enough, and like us, where we read sort of widely in terms of what language a book was originally written in, there's a feel to a translated novel.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons that I really like the Dark Forest trilogy by Sijuan Liu.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel like an American wrote it. It has a whole different, just like cultural vibe.
There's a different way of describing things. There's a different way that phrases are constructed. And it's really interesting. And a lot of times it's as much fun as the narrative itself.
Yeah. Okay, so since I recommended this book, I'll go ahead and take the lead.
Yeah, and I want to point out, I feel like we shit a lot on Zelazny last time, which, I don't know, he can take it. He's like a sci-fi giant. But that doesn't feel like the vibe we normally like to go with. So I just want to, I'm not apologizing for doing that.
Clear the air.
But we're going to give him another shot.
Another Zelazny book.
I'm going to read it. We're going to read another book by him. And we're going to get a larger sample size.
Yeah, especially after finding out that he did not want to publish Creatures of Light and Darkness.
Right.
He was pressured into it. He had to produce something, and that's what he had available at the time.
Right. So we're gonna read something else by him, and
something that he actually wanted to publish.
We're gonna start fresh. We're gonna
Give
we're
him
gonna do
a
this
second
again
chance.
because was that a bad book? No, it was not a bad book. It was not the kind of book that I enjoy. It was not the kind of book that you enjoy.
Right.
And I think that that was obvious. But it doesn't make it a bad book. It's just preference. And like anything else with anything, unless something is actively hateful and offensive and awful, it's 100% preference, what you like and what you don't like. And there's going to be books we don't like that other people love, and that's fine. And there was this book you recommended and enjoyed, and did I love it? I didn't love it. And that's okay. There were parts of it that I found really interesting. And I just wanted to point that out before we got started.
All right. So I listened to the audiobooks for these years ago when I used to go to an office.
Aww.
And I would walk laps around the building.
In the great old days of office work.
Yeah.
Commuting.
Yeah. Commuting. Okay. I didn't remember, like when we restarted this book, I didn't remember much of the plot from this book. I remember the second and third books a lot more. And the vibe that I remembered was like high technology that kind of feels like people wielding magic.
Okay.
Apparently that's a lot heavier theme in the later books.
Okay.
So when I pitched this book to you, it was under the tech as magic vibe. And that seems, in retrospect, kind of like false advertising. It kind of hits that a couple times in the book.
I can see where that could definitely grow from this. I can see that. Because the main character, one of the main characters has wings. And the way that they use like her ghost gun and her built-in technology, definitely, I can definitely see where in a different setting, this could very easily tip over that threshold into sufficiently advanced technology is indecipherable from magic.
Right. And the second book specifically goes really heavy into like Middle Eastern, like genie vibes. And so there's a lot of stuff around like these disembodied consciousnesses that have a lot of power in the system, in the technological system, and can just like manifest things, whatever. So they're non-human minds that have a really powerful ability to just create things and influence things and whatever. So they kind of treat them like genies. They're these wild spirits.
Yeah.
In the machine. And anyway, this book specifically starts off in a prison.
In a prison. And Jean Le Flambert is imprisoned in this prison. And he starts out getting his head shot.
Right.
Like there's a bullet going through his brain and he's like, well, was it fucking Tuesday? And honestly, we meet a character in the prison who's like the infinite one, because it's sort of like the game The Floor, where
The Floor.
So there's that new game. I think Rob Lowe is the host of it, and you have a category and you can challenge the people around you. It's a game show.
Okay.
And you take over area of the floor, and at the end, whoever controls the most area wins the game.
Okay.
And that's effectively what's happening. You can challenge anyone in adjacent rooms, and then you can take over their room. And there's that character that he alludes to existing in the prison, and that they are literally above the algorithm and they just do whatever the fuck they want.
Right.
I want that guy's book.
I think that's a device of the prison itself.
Oh.
Like a super player in the game.
Yeah.
That's specifically designed to
because he looks over and
undercut any
sees
player
himself,
advantage.
and he thinks it's himself. He thinks it's like a reflection, but it's not him, and it's a trick.
Right.
And he's like, "Oh shit, it's the guy who knows the game so well. He's taken over a bunch of the prison." I was like, "Dang it, I want that guy's story." Ooh, is he going to be the main character? No, it's Jean Laflambeau.
Okay, so I kind of discussed this in my consulting role on Gare Can Get It for Hypercube.
Okay.
It's kind of like where I speculated that in Hypercube, what's happening is they start off with one room and put it into this hyperdimensional space.
And it's just doubling.
And then it just starts splitting into alternate reality, alternate dimensions of itself. And when you put someone in, they get copied into these alternate dimensional rooms of the original room. And that's kind of what this prison is. It's like a genetic algorithm of you take the original mind that's in the prison and you make 100 variation copies of it where you tweak something internally, and then you let them play out and compete against each other. And then the ones that behave the way that you want get to survive to the next round.
Yeah.
And they get iterated on with variations until you get something that's very similar to the original, but isn't the original anymore.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be this thing where that's how you reform a serial criminal, is you literally modify them through like an evolutionary process.
Like in Demolition Man, where he wakes up and he can knit.
Yes.
Like that.
And he gets punished every time he swears.
Yeah.
But there's not really an enforcement there. Anyway, this prison has an enforcement mechanism.
Yeah.
Because it literally has your entire mind held captive.
But he gets broken out like immediately.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a heist. And we don't really get details on the heist.
A lady shows up and she's like, "We're yeeting." And he's like, "Then yeet we shall." And they yeet the fuck out. And
she has wings. It's supposed to be dramatic. And he gets on her ship. Her ship that is alive.
Her ship that is not perihelion.
Parhenin.
But
is how I pronounce. I don't know if these are supposed to be pronounced like French. I'm based on Jean Laflambeau.
But the writer's Finnish.
Right, but
so I don't know.
Parhenin.
Parhenon. I don't know. I know the ship is supposed to be a funny character.
Yeah.
I can see that in a clinical sense.
But it doesn't do it as... And maybe this was inspiration for Parhelion, a.k.a. Art in Murderbot.
I don't know. It feels a little on the nose. Maybe. It's definitely got a personality. It has more personality than some of the characters.
Yes.
And it tries to be really funny, and it tries to be really human, I guess, for lack of a better word. And sometimes it kind of succeeds, and sometimes you're just like, this is not the moment to make a joke. I just need you to fucking do what I told you to do.
Do your job.
Just do your job. And it makes more sense when you find out that like Miele grew Parhenin.
Yes.
That she created it. Like sung it into being. But you don't learn that till way later.
Right.
Yeah.
So So we have Meili, who broke Jean out of the prison.
Yes.
They are riding inside of Parhanan on a getaway from the prison.
Which notices they're gone and gives chase.
Yes. And so
which
it
is
sends
relevant
after
in the last
things
5
called
pages of the
Archon.
novel. Yeah.
Which is like a viral weapon that will get into whatever computing space it can and turn that into another instance of the same prison.
Yeah.
But Jean has a new body, an artificial body that has a lot of...
It's very Ghost in the Shell. No, what's the one where they had 2 actors. They only made 2 seasons of it. It's also a book series. They have sleeves.
Altered Carbon.
Altered Carbon.
Yes. Yeah. This has a lot of elements of Altered Carbon in that your mind, your consciousness is considered a separate thing from your body.
Yeah.
And you can upload... It's fairly seamless to upload your mind out of your body and put it somewhere else. But usually when you, like, if you were to say, upload your mind, transmit it to another planet, and then put it in a new body, the bodies have the ability to completely change their appearance to match however you want to
look like you. Yeah.
And you have these completely synthetic bodies that have, you know, they're super strong, lots of compute resources, whatever. So Jean is in a very fancy body, but he's locked down as to what he can do with it.
There's a lot of DRM.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Meili's got the DRM locked down on what he can do with the body. So one of the Archons hits the ship. Jean knows what to do because he's a con man.
Yeah.
He's always a fast thinker. He's resourceful. That's his vibe. That's what he does.
I will say that Meili gets them out of this. She does a lot to get them out of this first conflict. He solves the problem with the Archeron, but she gets them away from the Archon. But she gets them away from the combat ships.
Yes.
And I have one very specific gripe with this section.
Okay.
And I think you'll know what it is. And then once you hear it, you're going to go, oh, yeah. So Meili is highly modified. She's part of like the Sobernost. So they're very for the good of the many over the good of the one. So you give up you subject your body to individual adaptations to make you better at supporting the common cause.
The great common task.
The great common task. And the one thing that she has that she uses several times throughout the book, and every single time it was like nails on a chalkboard, is combat autism.
I was wondering when you were going to bring this up.
I was like...
I expected you to bring this up while you were reading it, but I want to say kudos.
Thank you.
On saving it for the pod.
Thank you, Matt.
Because you have not ranted at me at all.
Nope.
Maybe a couple times.
I have looked angrily in your direction while reading. Other than that, I have contained myself. It's not uncommon for me to throw a book down, look at Matt, and just start an angry tirade about whatever book I'm reading. I did not do that.
In this book's defense, it was published in 2010. And the perception of autism was a lot different.
All fair. It's fair. I think I would have accepted the term hyperfocus.
Right, so the prevailing from the media I was consuming and the like topics I was consuming at the time, autism, the like understanding of autism was an extreme on the spectrum of interest in things or facts.
Yeah. A dispassionate, unemotive way of interacting with information.
On the opposite end of the spectrum of interest in people.
Yeah.
And so the idea of combat autism as a way to narrow down all of your perception and attention onto the situation with a detachment from the people involved kind of made sense.
And like a dispassionate, unemotive way of just like completely focusing on what was happening.
Right.
It's not how autism works.
And we know that now.
I get it. But also, it like leapt off the page at me. I was like, oh, God, combat
what
autism?
This felt like to me was, you asked me several times while we were reading about whether this was translated from another language. This felt like one time where they looked up, okay, what is the English word for blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, autism. Oh, okay.
Autism. Oh, autism. That's
well,
a nice,
then it's on an editor
word
to catch that and go, what did you mean by this? Is this the best word to use for this? But it wouldn't have, no one would have flagged this word in 2010. And I get that, but also it ages the book, unfortunately.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Pippin got the cat toy.
Aw, Pippin's on the pod again. It's been so long.
How long is it supposed to be? Floppy bacon?
It is floppy bacon.
Okay.
Yeah. So they get out of that pretty quickly.
They escape. He contains the Archon inside of his Sobernost cybernetic body.
And we get this one brief moment where we know that Millie has a backstory. And then, you know what? That's fine. We just need to know she has a backstory. And then we never, ever, ever need to mention it ever again.
It gets fleshed out in later books.
Okay. I mean, hey, kudos to the author for having a long-term plan. If you seeded that all the way back there and then you dealt with it way later.
Maylee's situation as a reluctant member of this society that has a great common task where members of the society have to like sacrifice individual preference and privacy and bodily autonomy, whatever, feels kind of like one of the characters in This Is How You Lose the Time War, which if you have not read This Is How You Lose the Time War by Max something.
Maybe we just need to put it on the list for the next one.
You should read it and then listen to our podcast where we talk about it.
Which we haven't done yet, but we'll do. Kind of like a time thing. We're projecting into the future.
This Is How You Win the Time podcast.
This is a time travel podcast. Mentions of a podcast
it's
episode.
So good. But one of the characters, it's basically two characters, and one of them is like hyper tech timeline, and the other one is like hyper organic timeline.
Okay.
And they manipulate timelines. They travel through time. They're these time manipulation agents, and they're trying to like manipulate and prune timelines so that their timeline is dominant.
Okay.
So they win the time war.
Gotcha. And she reminds you of a character from that?
Yes. The hypertech time agent has like a heavily modified body with lots of cybernetic enhancements and whatever. But also like a top-down access from the ruler of their society.
You know what this reminded me of a lot? The 1,000 Deaths of Arter Ben. Where the main character thought they were the author thought the main character was a lot smarter than they actually read on the page. And then the female character who actually pulls off most of the work felt really, really bland.
This feels a little more polished as far as the
I'm just saying
character.
The author...
But it's a similar heist style.
Hannu thought Jean was coming off a lot more slick.
Yes.
And like smart con man than he actually came off.
Right. And in the later books, it's much more, he's not always 5 steps ahead of everybody. But this book, as an introduction to the trilogy, is a little less elegant, maybe.
It felt like the first book.
Yeah.
It felt like a way less involved Way of Kings, where we were just getting everybody out in the we were flushing out all the characters so that later we can have fun with them, but we needed to meet them all first.
Yeah.
Because so they get out, and they end up on Mars almost immediately, because
Right,
that's where whatever they've taken him out of the prison to do, what they need him to do is on Mars. What are they doing on Mars? Like, what did Meili get him out to do?
There's something on Mars that Meili's supervisor.
Yeah, the
wants.
Peregrini.
Yeah. I think it's he mentions very briefly at the end the Zoku's Pandora box,
Which he stole at one point.
He stole it from the Zoku colony on Mars and hid it in his, call it his mind palace.
Yeah.
Loosely interpreted. But he did not open it at the time.
I think that was maybe my main problem with this, because the world itself, once you got through the first couple of chapters where it was really overwhelming, which I can deal with, it never felt like the plot had a main thrust. Like,
right. It was always, okay, we went to Mars because Jean, we need you to
do
get
this
thing.
The thing. We need you to do
only
the thing.
Well, they don't even pitch it to him at first as this is a thing that only you can do on Mars. But the Pellegrini knows that there's something in this city that's hidden that only Jean can draw out. They pitch it to him as, you're our heist man. We need you to plan a heist. And
what are we heisting?
They don't tell him because it's like need to know only. And then he gets sidetracked because some things start popping up.
Yeah.
And he thinks that they are clues that he left for himself when he left. And he knows that he's missing memories. And so he's like, okay, while we're here doing this heist thing,
doing the thing,
I have some personal stuff I want to take care of, and taking care of it will help me be a more effective thief for you. But then Meili never pushes the main plot, I think because the Pellegrini is like, let him cook.
Yeah.
But doesn't tell Meili, oh yeah, there's this whole thing where he was like, so there's like the regular people, and then there's the founders.
Yeah.
And at some point in Earth history, we got the ability to like upload minds into computers, and nanotech and picotech and all that kind of bullshitty tech, tech lingo,
tech,
as a kind of as a veneer for magical prowess.
Yeah, godhood.
Like arcane power.
Yeah.
Arcane, I think, is a really good word.
Yeah.
Because arcane just means a system that you really need specialized training and experience to have competence with.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so arcane works with a lot of like technology. Like there are some arcane things you can do with the bash shell on the Linux terminal that you really need experience and like specialized training, like reading manuals and things to understand what's happening and to do it yourself. And then the same thing with magic, like wizards in D&D. It takes years of specialized training to have control over the arcane. So let's just call this the arcane.
Yeah. And so they end up like demigods. The founders are like demigods. Yeah.
Yeah. They have massive arcane power. And
they got in on the ground floor.
It sounds like Jean had a lot of arcane power.
At one
Whether
time.
it was his originally or he stole it, he was a player in the game.
Yeah.
The great game. And so
now he's not.
Now
and
he's not.
We don't even know why he got in the prison.
No.
I
think we cover it later.
Maybe. All we find out in this book is that, yes, he did split his consciousness. And wouldn't you know it, he was originally an asshole.
Yes.
Yes.
But one of the archetypal stories is a powerful asshole man.
Yeah. Okay, I'm following you.
Getting into a relationship with a woman that can match him.
Don't we love a fixer-upper?
And realizing that he needs to be better. Like a call to action, a recognition that...
A mirror.
Yeah. A mirror to see that he is not what he could be.
Yeah.
And the feminine, spirit inspires him to look in deeply to himself.
Like Enkidu getting fucked into civilization.
Fucked into sentience?
Yes.
But then also beating Gilgamesh at his own game and saying, if a wild man can beat you, what could a civilized man do?
Yeah.
You need to be better. Because the path of...
I think it gives them someone to be better for.
Yes.
I need to be better for this
And
partner.
there's an archetype there of like a motivation for character development for a masculine character.
And I think I see where the author was trying for that.
Yeah.
And I think Raymond is supposed to be that for Jean.
Or at least the version of Raymond that was with Jean 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But the Cryptarch kind of implies that because of the Cryptarch's like influence over anybody who's been a quiet, he's actually compromised Raymond.
Yeah, so
manipulated Raymond.
What we do is we go to Mars. We're getting
for
a little
spite against Jean
ahead because we go to Mars and we find out that whatever it is that we need is on Mars. And like, if anybody figured out what that was, do let me know, because I got to the end of the book and did not know what it was.
Okay, here's what it was.
We go on side quests. Like, we immediately go on side quests.
The Pellegrini's goal for Jean to be there is to take down the Tsakidim and let the Cryptarch keep ruling.
Okay. Which is the opposite of what they do. Kind of.
They take down the Cryptarch and maintain support for the
They
Tsakidim.
kind of appoint a new Cryptarch. Which is Isidore.
The Cryptarch passes on the key, the master key, to Isidore. And Isidore wants to give it up.
Yeah.
But he needs to make sure that happens in a safe way. Anyway.
Right. So we end up in this world
so
on
I think
Mars.
that's the ultimate motivation is it was a...
Maybe what she wanted all along was for Jean to find himself. Literally.
What's the word for a MacGuffin?
Yeah.
They
Except
get there.
They just didn't even give him a MacGuffin. They were like, I don't know, go there.
They tell him that there is a MacGuffin, but they don't tell him what the MacGuffin is.
Yeah.
Maybe the idea of the MacGuffin is the MacGuffin, but then he immediately starts pursuing the things that will lead him to do the things that they want him to do.
Right.
Which is expose this whole thing in a way that gives the Pellegrini the tools she and Meili need to take down the Tsakidim and hand them over to the Cryptarch, because the Cryptarch and the Pellegrini are in cahoots.
Right. I think just your last several sentences are really highlighting one of my main issues with the book, which was the number of made-up terms. It was overwhelming, the number of made-up terms. And the fact that we didn't really ever describe, like, we get them in context, but we don't have a character who doesn't know what they are and needs them explained. So that we don't get an audience stand-in who can go like, what the fuck is Gevulat? Or what do you mean exo memory? Or what are the phobi? Phobi?
Yeah, we don't even discuss the origin of the phoboi.
What is a quiet? What is a... And that's what we needed. We needed a character. We needed Jean to be like out of the loop. So someone had to explain all this to him.
Right.
Because we end up having to get it just from like, oh man, my organ that I possess that can sense privacy wasn't telling me anything right now. It made me feel blind.
I think Maylee was supposed to be that, but she doesn't really ask questions.
And she has her own shit going on. She's got a like nuclear reactor in her thigh bone. She's got a lot of shit going on. She's not paying attention to everything else. And Pixel could have been that. In like oh, that's cute. What is that?
Right.
Oh, that's Gevulat. That's privacy.
As someone who had to learn this from the outside, I can explain this to you.
Right. I mean, and that would have worked. And I feel like that's what this book was missing, was like everybody already knew the score. Everybody knew what was going on. Nobody needed anything explained. I do. Hello. I do. I need to know what's happening. I am not computer. I don't public and private key I loved the idea of privacy as a commodity, and which is kind of what it is right now, but like everyone having individual control over their privacy to the point where you can be like, hey, this conversation, can you forget it? Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to revoke your permission to remember this conversation.
This interaction.
Yes. So this is like, there's something like this idea in The Fall or Dodge in Hell by Neil Stephenson.
Okay.
Where it's kind of like the proto version of this, where people wear masks that you can't see through, and they convey identity with digital signals. So like I can have my whole rig on and broadcast, this is my identity. And then that identity has like a cryptographic key that's associated with like online activity. So then you could like meet me in person and get my digital identity and say, oh, you are such and such, my online handle, look me up and say, oh, here's his GitHub, here's their whatever.
Yeah.
And so this seems like 1,000 years from now, 1,000 years from The Fall or Dodge in Hell, what would that kind of like identity autonomy be like?
Yeah.
And you might say this is like a libertarian wet dream where everybody is like a sovereign citizen.
Yeah.
And they have full control over how much of their own information other people have access to.
Right.
Down to what you even look like.
Yeah, you can turn into like the gray avatar with just a question mark over your face.
Yes.
The like, I didn't upload a photo avatar.
Right.
Yeah, and I thought that was really fascinating. And the idea of exo memory, where you have like just a collective memory in an area that is stored,
right,
that everyone can access.
You can access it like short-term memory.
Yeah, and then everyone can remember, oh, what happened? Oh, okay, now I know. Like, it's been uploaded to exo memory. I can access it. Great. That was really fascinating. The world felt really fascinating because when we get to Mars, Mars is actually distinct from the rest of the universe in their protection of privacy.
Right.
And so we end up in this city, which we eventually realize is a mobile city, like it's constantly walking. It's on the move. It takes a long time for us to realize that. And it is called the Oubliette, which the first time I heard that, all I could hear was hoggle from the Labyrinth when he's
Yes,
like, this is the
absolutely.
place you go to be forgotten. And I was like, oh, it's the oubliette. It's like a place. These people are here to be forgotten. There's some story to this place.
Right. Like a hermit society almost.
Which it turns out is the twist at the end.
Right.
That it started out as a prison. And everyone believes that at some point there was a revolution and that they won their right to privacy and that they won their right to citizenship, which it turns out is a big fat lie. It just gives them like a rallying cry. Like, we won the revolution. Well, there was no actual revolution. But everybody believes there was because everyone has a certain amount of time, which is tracked on a watch. And that is the currency. You pay seconds and minutes and time to other people to get services. And then when you run out of time, you have to serve time as a quiet. And
then when you get done with your year of quiet, you get some time back.
And you get to be a person again for a little while.
And then you can, as your job, I guess the currency is time.
Yeah.
Or one of the currencies. There's probably other things. Like there's probably
mostly time.
There's kind of a barter system.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like at the end, he's like, I will pay you 1 megasecond if you can get your taxi over to the Zoku city really, really fast.
Yeah.
Which a megasecond would be 1,000,000 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of time. And we know that the quiet are actually like the people. They're not, I thought quiet meant like they used your personality or yourself as a processor to run these things, but that you weren't conscious. But then Isidore goes down to meet his father.
Right. You're still kind of conscious, but it's similar to combat autism.
Yeah.
In that the context that your consciousness is running in kind of constrains or directs all of your attention and your sensibilities as to what is significant to be kind of hyper focused on. This is my job as a quiet. My consciousness is being forced to be hyper focused on my duties as a quiet.
Yeah.
Do your duty, quiet.
And I like how some of them like throw themselves bodily at the enemy. And some of them are like janitors. There's just like such a wide range of quiet tasks.
Your consciousness, your mind, isn't really in danger.
Yeah.
So if your mind is piloting a quiet and you go fight the faux boy and your quiet body gets destroyed, your mind is still there.
Yeah.
Like in the oubliette, in the whatever.
Right. And we find out that in the transition between quiet and regular life, everyone's consciousness is being edited by the Cryptarch, the ruler of the oubliette, who manifests as this like collective consciousness being, which they also refer to as the voice. And
which makes a lot more sense when you find out it was a prison first.
Yeah, and there is a group of people known as the Sadikim.
Singular
Tzakkid.
I am.
Singular
Tzadik. Oh, Tzaddik.
Yeah. Sadiq,
Plural,
and then
I am. Sadikim.
Who are working against the Cryptarchs.
Kind of as vigilantes.
And the pirates, the Gogol pirates.
Okay, so a Gogol
is like a program.
It's when you take someone's mind and kind of strip it down.
Like the murder bot that he creates, the little disembodied murder bot that Murderbot and Perihelion
Murderbot
create.
2.0.
Yeah.
Would be a good example of a Gogol, where it is let's say you want someone who's good at skill X.
Yeah.
Or you want a computer program.
You want a living, thinking mind that you can inject into a computer and it can take over that computer.
You want a program that is good at skill X.
Yeah.
you find a human mind that is good at skill X, and you steal that mind, or you copy that mind. Some people will sell their minds as Gogol's. And then you take that copy of the human mind, and you basically strip off the consciousness part and keep the procedural memory part.
Yeah.
Like, okay, this person is really, really good at doing numbers stuff. Or this person is really, really good at even something like pottery.
Hacking.
Well, it can be like...
Yeah, and you run it.
Yeah, and you run it like a program.
Yeah.
You just run their procedural memory, the skill that they've built up that's not part of their like active experiential consciousness.
Yeah.
So having a Gogol that writes compelling narratives would be really hard because you have to keep that experiential consciousness around.
Yeah.
But having a Gogol that can bake really, really well is a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Because the techniques for baking are more clearly defined.
Right.
Anyway.
So one of the problems is that there's Gogol pirates who can steal your personality, steal a copy of you.
They steal your mind and
then
destroy you.
Yeah, they destroy the part of you that is you and then use your skills for their own purposes, which is actually terrifying.
Like in, what's the Jordan Peele movie where they do the brain transplant thing? Get Out.
Get Out.
Kind of like Get Out.
Terrifying.
Where you find...
Except you're not stealing the body, you're stealing the mind inside the body.
Well, yeah, in Get Out, like the main character that was being like recruited or selected and hunted was selected for his artistic eye. His ability to perceive like visual beauty.
Was he? I thought it was just because he was black.
Well, it's because he was black, because it's a racist narrative.
Yeah.
But he was also being selected because the person that wanted him was an art collector who had gone blind. And the main character was an up-and-coming photographer.
Yes. Yeah.
So he was really, really good at photography and like recognizing and appreciating aesthetic beauty.
Yeah.
And this blind art critic wanted that sensibility of recognizing aesthetic beauty.
Clearly, I need to rewatch this movie. But yes, that sounds exactly like, yes, that.
Yeah. And so that would be an example of someone purchasing a Gogol and using it.
So the third group that is on this planet, which I think is supposed to be largely a joke because they honestly don't do anything for the plot except give Isidore something to do besides deduce, which is used to this is an example of when I thought this guy is a translated character because he's like, he couldn't help it. He felt like deducing.
Yeah.
Wait, no one in English says that, but that's fine. Like, I get it. I get where you're going, but also like, it just felt like, whoa, what?
There's a guy I work with who's from Finland. I did not know Hannu Rajaniemi was Finnish. So next time I talk to him, I will ask him.
Like, what does deducing mean to you?
Well, no, I'll just ask him, do you know who Hannu Rajaniemi is? Have you read anything by him?
You're Finnish. Do you know him?
No.
I get where you're going.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. In his original. No, it's fine. It doesn't take away from the book. It's just an odd way of phrasing it. But Isidore
stands out.
Isidore is one of our POV characters, and he is dating a woman named Pixel, who is
and
a
Rachel.
Zoku.
Rachel was not in this book for Isidore.
I was not in this book for Isidore, and I don't feel like
reading
Isidore...
Way of Kings, and then you get the non-Kaladin POV sections.
He doesn't add anything to the book until the very end when the twist is about him, kind of.
I think the first POV section where he's solving the chocolatier, like, Gogol pirate crime.
And everybody already knew the answer. They were just waiting to see if it would be cute, if he could figure it out. That section?
Right, but to get it from his perspective,
yeah,
I think is that first section of his POV character, and then like at the end, his POV character. But the Isidore stuff in between was meh.
It was shoehorned in there.
Yeah.
And it's okay. Anyway, it's to introduce us to Pixel, who is a Zoku, who additionally had no real purpose in this plot. This plot this book would have benefited greatly from focus.
Yeah.
And
everything that Isidore and Pixel did, Jean could have done.
And it would have given me more time with Jean. I would have met him. He's actually in this book very, very little.
Right.
So every time he pops up and I'm supposed to be impressed by this character, I'm like, we're back with Jean? Oh, okay. All right. Honestly,
who is
the
Jean?
little green character that Isidore names Sherlock was the best character in the whole fucking book. But Pixel and Isidore, anyway, Pixel is a Zoku, and Zoku felt like a direct lift from that book I read, There Will Be Dragons, which I can't remember who it's by, but it's the one where it's, yes, a far distant technology-based civilization where it is possible to completely customize your form, and people do stuff like become mermaids and become dragon. Well, you can't become a dragon. You have to be grandfathered into becoming a dragon. Like it's a protected race. Same thing with elves. Only certain people can become elves. You have to be like born into the right to become an elf. They're like a sheltered race. And there's a global war, and it takes down the global power net, and everyone loses the ability to
all the technology goes down.
Everybody's
stuck in the situation they're
all
in.
of a sudden, we're in a world with elves and dragons and no technology. Sword and sorcery fantasy. We were immediately in. It's a really interesting idea, but the people that save us are the reenactors, because they're the ones who are not reliant on technology to do things. And the Zoku are wizards of the coast. They are wizards of the coast projected far into the future. Their whole life is
They're
raids.
the gaming guilds.
They're the gaming guilds. They have a LAN party halfway through the book where they all get together and they all are in cosplay. And they're entangling with people. Like they're connecting their landlines together to play games with each other.
Yeah.
And that's when Isidore goes and he gets drunk on shit beer because it's authentic. And I think they're supposed to be funny. I see you, Hannu. I see what you were trying to do, and I appreciate it.
A nostalgia grab for the author.
It felt like this weird segue into Ready Player One, but only like a side view of Ready Player One. Yeah. Like everyone else in the world is living their lives, and there's this weird little offshoot of people that are still hanging on to Ready Player One world.
There's the Zokus that are living in their own autonomous society where it's the like late stage tech society where all of everybody's like fundamental needs are taken care of. They're automated by the technology.
Yeah.
And so the only thing these people have to do is play games.
And everything's a game. They're like, "Oh, you're playing the detecting game." And he's like, "It's not. People die. It's not really a game."
Right next to the city of people who, like, actually have to live in the physical world with constraints.
Yeah.
They actually need to get real food and eat the real food and digest the food for energy for their body.
And they're like, "Wow, how quaint."
And
that's so weird.
Like they have to work a job so they can get time to continue living.
And the Zoku are only there because their original home was destroyed.
Right. They were refugees.
Yeah.
And
Mars took them in.
They got to live here next to the oubliette.
And the big reveal at the end is that the Cryptarch was like, "Hey, Zoku, can you help me?" And they were like, "Meh, yeah, I mean, fucking fine. I don't really give a shit. As long as we get to stay here and we get to use your power grid and we get to play games."
I need some fake news to publish to my citizens.
And they were like, yeah, no.
Can you make some fake news for me?
We can make that game. Like, we can run that campaign for you.
Yeah.
The revolution campaign, not a problem. And then they were like, oh, wait, actually, maybe that was a little chaotic evil of us. Maybe we need to bring it back to neutral. So they create the Zodikim. And they're like, well, we'll just create the vigilantes that fight the bad guy.
What a fun game.
That'll be a great game. We'll just see how that plays out. That's fine. And so Pixel is our Zoku character, whose only real purpose is to introduce the entanglement ring.
Yes,
so
that's
that
the
Jean
Chekhov's
can
rifle.
So that Jean can get into the big spire at the end. Because we go through a lot. He meets Raymond, who we find out he was obsessed with, a former lover. I wanted this to hit so fucking bad, and it just didn't. He met Raymond, and I was like, I don't get the appeal. I don't know. And we find out we get these little hints that, like, maybe they had a child, maybe they didn't have a child, but kind of maybe they did have a child. And you're like, I don't care enough about any of these characters to care. And I was like, there's only one other character, and it's Isidore. So if they had a child, it's Isidore.
Right.
And guess what? It was Isidore at the end. What's not, though, like, it is, but it isn't, because the ending was very confusing, because there's Jean Le Flambert.
Yeah.
Which I looked at Flambert, to see what it meant in French. And I don't remember what it was, but it didn't make sense. I don't remember it being, I was like, is it like
Oracle.
Jean the Fire? Is it like, and stuff happens in the middle, and I know it feels like we're glossing over it, but honestly, when it does happen, you're like, whoa, action occurred. Why? Where? What are we doing? Like, they go and they meet the Gogol Pirates, and it turns out the Gogol Pirates are like a Sobernost group, but they're like hive minds, but they're like groups of hive minds, which doesn't really get explained. And then
Ooh. Okay. So I just Googled Le Flambeur.
Okay.
Which and the top few results all refer to a movie called Bob Le Flambeur.
Okay, I like it better already. Just kidding.
Which translates to Bob the Gambler or Bob the High Roller.
Okay.
It's a 1956 French heist gangster film directed by a guy named Jean.
Oh.
Jean-Pierre Melville.
Oh, would you look at that?
Starring Robert Duchesne as Bob.
Hannu, I see
It is often considered both a film noir and a precursor to the French New Wave, the latter because of its use of a handheld camera and a single jump cut.
Okay. So it's like a gambler? I only got the direct translation, which clearly was not what it actually is.
Okay.
And then at the end, we meet Jean Leroy, who is the king of Mars, who we meet in like we get like a soupçon of Jean Leroy, like immediately at the beginning.
We don't know anything about who the Cryptarch is.
Like at the very beginning, he goes to the like
the memory palace thing.
No, he goes to the port where everybody leaves Mars, the place where the spaceships land and take off from. And he's like, I can't leave. Like, he's physically compelled to never leave. And he's like, oh, what a bargain I struck. And I was like, ooh, cool. Never fucking saw him again.
Oh,
never.
Yeah, at the very beginning.
Isidore and the chocolate shoes get more time. Yeah. Spaceport. God damn it. I could not think of the word.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Bob is a gambler who lives on his own in the Montmartre district of Paris. A former bank robber and convict, he has mostly kept out of trouble for the past 20 years.
Did he have a woman named Raymond?
No.
Dang it.
No. Let's see, he's friends with the police commissioner. Bob lets Anne, an attractive young woman who has just lost her job, stay in his apartment in order to keep her from the attention of Mark, a pimp that he hates.
I mean, we keep having flashbacks to Paul de Sartre?
Sartrine?
I don't know. Paul, who is Jean Laflambert.
Right. It's his alter ego.
It's his alter ego, because at a certain point he falls in love with Raymond and he decides he's going to stay. But he is some kind of demigod, like immortal demigod. And he's been around for a really long time.
Right.
And he has a lot of baggage. And he's like, the only way I'm going to be able to stay here and be truly in love with her is if I give up parts of myself.
Right.
So instead of hiding them in sane, normal, nice person things.
Instead of actually just destroying the parts of himself that are inhibiting
because
his ability to be with
the OG Jean
Raymond.
Is an asshole.
Right.
And he knew he was never going to want to give it up forever. He needed a way to get it back when he wanted it back.
Although, at the end, when it came down to it, Jean is holding the gun with the 9 bullets in it. And he needs to fire all 9 bullets, which will effectively kill his 9 closest friends.
Yeah.
As a disincentive to become the asshole that he used to be. And he realizes, you knew that I would never be able to do it. Like, yes, you preserved the parts of yourself that you did not want to be anymore.
Yeah.
But you knew that the core of yourself that was going to be left behind would never be able to do that to your friends.
Right.
Which means, like, the core of him is probably the same. Just
or maybe
minus the
only the type of person who would be willing to do that is the type of person who would deserve to have his mind back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he doesn't end up doing it.
He would have to become the asshole again before he could recover the memories of the asshole version of himself.
Right.
He would have to earn it
because
back.
he's hidden his pieces in watches and given them to his friends.
Right.
And the minute he does it, it will consume all of their remaining time.
Right.
And that will effectively kill them.
And
make them quiets.
Right. It makes them quiet.
It does kill them because the resurrection men come and get them. It kills the body that they're in.
Right.
Because he even has a thing where he becomes dead for a little while because they steal a minute of time from this guy.
Unra,
who was a millennia heir.
He's got
that he owns
loads of time.
Loads of time. He's like the Elon Musk of time. And he decides, well, it's just, maybe I want to figure out, maybe the poor people know what I don't know. It's kind of reminds me of the heir to Sky Blue. You know, Sky Blue, or Blue Sky, the company, the flight company, the like cheap flight company.
Spirit Airlines?
I think it might be Spirit. Anyway, one of them is, maybe it's something to add. It doesn't matter. The heiress to one of those companies is like a huge influencer on Instagram as like a trad wife, like I make my own bread and shit lady.
Wow.
And she's got a homestead and she's a homesteader. And she's like,
I only recently found out that trad wife meant traditional wife.
I'm so happy for you. It's because if you looked at me and went, I want you to be a trad wife, I would cut your dick off in your sleep and you know it.
It's not in my algorithm at all. I never get any of that stuff, but then Rachel and Meg.
I don't. Meg does.
Meg does.
Yeah.
Meg does.
I don't because even Instagram
the algorithm knows you.
It fucking knows. So anyway, she's like a famous trad wife influencer. Like traditional wife, homesteader, I make my own cheese, my own bread, all that bullshit. Giant garden, whatever.
Okay.
Mega wealthy, trust fund baby. She's literally like, look how good I am at the poor stuff, you guys. She's cosplaying as a poor
I was
person.
about to say cosplay.
She's cosplaying as a poor person. It's weird. Okay. And that is, I don't remember how this started. Oh, that's what he's doing. That's what Jean Le Flambert is doing. He is this. I've literally been around since the beginning. He knows a lot of the founders from before they were founders.
Right.
When they were just a bunch of tech bros.
Him.
Yeah, when they were just a bunch of tech bros, like, what happens if we did this?
Right. He keeps meeting people that are like powers and principalities, and they're like, oh, hey, Jean, how's it going?
I gotta say, the most problematic part of this book, and the most that when I read it, I thought, this was written by a man, is Melly giving her body to the Pellegrini.
Yeah.
And then Jean Le Flambert fucking it all night long.
That doesn't age well at all.
While she just literally mentally steps into the other room so that her body can be used for him. I was like, that's a big step. That does not feel great. Because he's like, well, I'm real horny and I did want to fuck her. And this isn't her, but it is her body. And that feels like the next best thing.
It's also a way for him to, what's the word?
It's a con because he ends up stealing the rest of her time.
Right, because he's trying to get her out of the way.
Yeah, because at this point,
and having her her, like, pass her body over to the Pellegrini, where he knows the Pellegrini is not as
wise
vigilant.
To his tricks. Yeah.
And so he can con the Pellegrini,
right.
But he knows he can't con Meili.
Yeah, but did he have to fuck her? No. I mean, he does. It doesn't matter. It's supposed to be like, it's a means to an end, but it's not an unpleasant means to an end. Tee ha ha hee hee. But you're like,
right.
Oh, wow. Okay. I don't love this section of this book. But what he ends up doing is stealing the rest of her time. So she'd be kicked off the planet, basically. Like, if you come to visit, you don't get turned into a quiet. You
get
only
shut down.
Have so much time on the planet.
You get turned off.
Yeah. So she gets turned off and he's like, yeet. And he ends up leaving because he's figured out everything at this point. He grabs his gun. He's going to use it, which he gave the gun to Raymond because he loved Raymond. Or so I've been told. And he's going to shoot them because each bullet is like the 9 virtues or something. And each one holds a piece of him. And he's like, fuck it, I don't want to be that guy.
Ooh,
I don't want to be the
like
guy.
Horcruxes.
Yeah, exactly, our Horcruxes. And he's like, I don't want to be the guy that would do this. And if I do this, I'm going to become that guy again. And I don't want to be them. I gave him up for a reason. I don't want him back.
Right.
So he just goes, yoink, and yoinks the gun of all of my knowledge and ambition.
I feel like there's a scene in Tales from the Night Side that is just like this. He has a gun that can, like, kill angels or something.
Yeah, the
and
speaking
he just
gun. Yeah.
Gets rid of it. And
then
it comes
somebody
back. Gets it.
It comes back later.
Yeah.
Yeah. This book was a love letter to a lot of other books. And in fact, I don't have my Kindle right with me, but I highlighted every reference to a classic sci-fi novel. And there were a lot of them. Like when he first goes to Mars, Meili can't walk. And he says he uses the John Carter shuffle.
Yes.
And he references War of the Worlds. He references quite a few classic sci-fi novels. This book was a love letter to a lot of other books, and it kind of felt like it.
Yeah.
I have no problem with people referencing other books in their books. We all come from somewhere. Authors are always writing the book that they want to read. And a lot of times they talk about books that have led them to this. And that's fine. This felt a lot. Like I felt like I could see the blueprint of each. Felt like I could probably figure out where he got each idea based on what book he got it from.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, very much so.
And I'm thinking that probably this first book was like it. I'm guessing this guy is a huge fan of sci-fi, and he wrote this sci-fi book based on all these other sci-fi books that he loved.
Right, just throwing all the ideas in a pot and stirring it.
And making like, oh, this was cool. What if they did it this way? This was a cool idea. What if they used it that way? And then second and third book are probably like, okay, I've created the world. What do I do now? What do I do now?
Yeah.
Yeah. There were quite a few. A couple of them were pretty obscure too. Lovecraft, because he mentions that the little green guy
looks
is
like
Lovecraftian.
Cthulhu. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sherlock.
He
Sherlock
names
is a
him
little
Sherlock.
green Cthulhu.
And then with that word that we never ever explain what it means. It's like Terranesque, or the word I was looking for is Thibermesnil. Thibermesnil.
Yep.
Which gets thrown at us a couple times, just like, here you go. And never explained. Okay, so you looked it up on the Oracle. What does it say? The Oracle here being the phone.
Okay, so one hit is from a Sherlock Holmes novel.
I think in this book it's referenced in
Chateau de Thibermesnil.
Okay.
But then the other hit was
in the book it's in reference to Sherlock Holmes. But go ahead.
I got a hit on the Project Gutenberg from a book called The Extraordinary Adventures of Arsène Lupin, Gentleman Burglar by Maurice Leblanc.
This book is a love story to other stories. I stand by that.
And it's a reference to Chateau de Thibermesnil.
What happens in that? Like, what happens in that book?
It's a location.
Okay.
I don't know what the... hold on. Between the door and the window to the left stood an immense bookcase of Renaissance style, on the pediment of which, in letters of gold, was the word Thibermesnil. And below it, the proud family device, Fais ce que veux, do what thou wishest. Okay. When their guests had lighted their cigars, Devon resumed the conversation, blah, blah, blah.
Because it's on his watch and he has to push certain buttons and it gives him the name Raymond for him to go and find her. So, okay. Apparently I also highlighted the definition of Gogol, a dead soul, the uploaded mind of a human being enslaved to carry out tasks, anathema to anyone from the oubliette.
Oh, that's the same section that I just read is also in this chapter 9, Sherlock Holmes arrives too late. It's the same.
Oh.
The same paragraph.
I also highlighted the definition of Gevulot. Gevulot sense, an oubliette citizen's acute awareness of privacy settings in the intelligent matter all around.
It's the name of a castle or a palace.
Oh, is it? Like a memory palace.
Chateau de Thibermesnil. Okay. So he's got some fandoms that he's homaging to.
Yeah, easing into the low gliding John Carter lope of all the tall Martians around me. That one. And I was like, oh, but see what you did there, John Carter. And then hell, said a gruff voice, hell is other people, which I'm pretty sure is a Poe quote because there's a Korean drama called Hell is Other People.
Hell is other people is a famous line from French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre.
Oh, dang it. I was so close.
The existentialist.
Okay.
It was from a play called No Exit.
By Sartre?
Yeah.
And then the carriage lurches back and forth as the vehicle, the bastard child of a spider, an H.G. Wells war machine, and a taxi, leaps over rooftops and clings to the wall. So there's H.G. Wells.
There's the hot air balloon and the portion of the town that the hot air balloon is attached to.
Montgolfiersville?
Montgolfiersville.
I was like, oh, okay, I know that one too. Yeah, Sherlock Holmes arrives too late. They reference that in this directly. Because he says, Sherlock Holmes arrives too late, a secret passage unlocked by, and then in the book, Sherlock Holmes arrives too late. He has to press the H, the R, and the L. And that's how he unlocks his watch too.
Yep.
I'm reading through my highlights to see if there's any other good references. Metacortex, there's something we didn't talk about. Metacortex, Q dot, smart material, Q fiber.
So metacortex. Let me check. Let me check another book. That may be another book reference.
It very well could be.
I'm going to look up Diaspora by Greg Egan.
Yeah, shame. He could use one. Something from Lovecraft, perhaps. That's when he's talking about the little green thing, Isidore.
1997. So in Diaspora, there's a lot of the situation, I guess a lot of exploration on consciousness and what it means to be human in a world where you can just upload your brain to a computer.
Yeah.
And live a life in the computer where you don't have all of your fundamental needs are taken care of. And when all of your needs are taken care of, what do you do?
Yeah.
And there's a few times where they refer to their, I think they even use the word metacortex as or exoself. That's how they use it in Diaspora. You can construct an exoself and let it run. And then and you can give it rules. And so if you don't want to be interrupted, but you want your friends to be able to come see you if it's urgent, then your exoself has enough information about you and what you care about to determine whether or not messages get through to the real you.
Oh.
And so it's like an external layer of processing to filter the information that's getting itself to you. And that's kind of what the metacortex does.
Yeah. That makes sense. It makes sense. I get it. It was just in a sea of other terminology.
Yes. Yeah, he throws around a lot of high-tech terms that are really just jargon.
All of which I would have been cool with. I would have been like, oh, cool. Except you gave me this oh, that's my Gevulot. Just call it your privacy filter. Call it your privacy filter and then use the word Gevulot.
Yeah.
Don't hit me with Gevulot and then reel me back in with, oh, that's my privacy sense.
But a lot of these stuff like smart matter, Q dot, whatever, I feel like you could still tell mostly the same story, but replace those with mechanisms that describe magical abilities.
Yeah.
Which is what I like about the second book with all the genies and stuff.
Yeah. There was one really good moment, and it was in one of our flashbacks. And it was the flashback where Paul has built this architectural wonder, which Isidore is supposed to be an architecture student, which we cover for 5 words approximately at one point, maybe in the book.
Maybe 5 whole sentences.
Maybe 5 whole sentences. And I feel like that would have been a real great tie-in between Isidore and Paul. But I think it's just supposed to be is Paul his dad? Because they both like building stuff. But whatever. It's fine. So we have this flashback and we're talking to this character that we're never going to meet again. So it doesn't really matter. And she's discussing with Paul sort of the burden of what happens when you are in a post-mortality society. So these people are effectively immortal. You can't die. You just get your consciousness moved from body to body. So if your body fails, you just move to another one.
Yep.
And so they have this really interesting discussion about, are you actually immortal? Or are you dying by metamorphosis? Because as you age, you change. And eventually you will change so profoundly that you will be unrecognizable as the person you started as. And is that actually immortality, or is it just another form of death? And so what you do is cling to sameness. You cling to unchangeability.
Mm-hmm.
And then that ends up becoming a weakness. So true immortality is actually weakness. It is like a
remaining the same
yeah.
over a long period of time is a failure.
Right.
In a way.
Because she says there is no light at the end of the tunnel anymore. There's just time chipping away at us. And I thought that was a really interesting way to describe the conundrum of immortality. And are you still you? So is Jean Le Flambert still Jean Le Flambert, even if he would now never pull the trigger on that gun?
Right. And so that's a theme that comes up kind of early. And then I think they reference it maybe one or two times, but it really could have been a much deeper conflict.
I would have really liked that.
Inside of Jean.
Who am I
if
now?
we had more time with him?
Who am I now? Because he's in that prison. He knows every iteration of his consciousness in that prison was changed in some subtle way. And he doesn't
actually know,
and he doesn't know how
many iterations he is.
So he doesn't know where he started. So he doesn't know what has changed.
Right.
He has no way of tracking that.
Even the version of himself that gave up all the memories and everything to be with Raymond. There was a reference to being with Raymond and being Paul Sartine, and that's how he ended up in the prison.
It was the box. He goes, it was all going to be fine until the box. Capital B box.
Right. So I think at some point while he was on Mars and he kind of sorted himself out so that he could be the better man to be a like worthy partner of Raymond. And then he got caught and put in the prison.
Yeah, he got tempted by the box.
It reminds me of the movie As Good as It Gets.
Okay.
Have you ever seen that?
Isn't that the one with Jack Nicholson?
It's Jack Nicholson, I think Rob Lowe, and Helen Hunt.
It's not Rob Lowe. It's the guy who's in Ghost Town with Ricky Gervais. I don't know his actual name because he's his gay neighbor, right?
Yeah. Greg Kinnear.
Yep.
Who looks a lot like Rob Lowe. Okay.
If you squint, sure.
Yeah. And I think my mom really liked this movie.
Of course she did. Yes.
So I saw it several times growing up. And probably, I don't know, the last time I watched it, I think they try to hit on this topic during the movie. Like as a part of the narrative where Jack Nicholson and Helen Hunt go to dinner and he has really bad OCD, like uncontrollable, like tics and stuff. And he has medication, but he doesn't take it. And so they're having dinner and she remarks that he's being incredibly like well behaved.
Yeah.
And
you make me want to be a better man.
Yes.
Okay. Is that where we're going? I'm sorry. Do you want to finish describing that whole scene? You can do that if you want to. Yeah. You make me want to be a better man.
Right.
Is a great line.
Right. And it's kind of too good of a line for that movie.
It would have been too good of a line for this book, honestly, because the first time they're going to have sex, it's because he's made himself look like somebody else and he's tricked her into thinking he's somebody different.
It's because they haven't shared enough Gevulot. So she doesn't actually see what his body looks like until the next morning. And she's like, you fucking bastard.
No, they don't make it to the next morning.
Right,
They're
yeah.
getting undressed and she's like, you asshole.
Right. Like he finally opens up enough Gevulot and she's like, I can't believe you did this to me.
I mean, the part that I want emphasized in this book is how terrifying it is when you become software running on hardware, and that means anybody can edit your code. That's fucking terrifying. That's what's happening in the oubliette. They all believe an event happened that never happened.
Right.
And then in the end, they create that that meme, that viral idea that overrides the changes that were made.
So this is blockchain.
Okay.
Their memories are literally a sequence of transactions that are cryptographically signed, and only the actors who possess the cryptographic private key that was used to generate those signatures can modify them, which means whoever generated if you have the root private key that generates everybody's private keys, then
the
you
voice
can
does.
like the voice,
then you can edit it.
You can edit everybody's blockchain, which is a cryptographic ledger of transactions, right? But inadvertently, Jean creates an artificial identity with a private key that was not generated by the cryptarch's root private key.
Yeah.
And so when you share that co-memory that's signed by the non-cryptarch root key, now the cryptarch's root key cannot modify that transaction in the blockchain.
Right.
So now that person is inoculated to manipulation by the cryptarch, which feels very relevant to me right now because I'm doing PKI, public key infrastructure stuff at work. And just today and yesterday, I've been reading into cross-signing certificates by multiple root certificate authorities.
I'm glad it was really meaningful to you.
And so
I got it in an abstract sense. Oh, that makes it unable. That makes them unable to change your shit anymore. Right. That's cool.
A mechanism for explaining this plot device that's actually based in reality. Oh, that's really cool. This isn't just this isn't just a jargony tech thing. It's actually based on existing technology. But I realize most people don't get that deep into public key infrastructure.
Mm-mm.
And so
God, and more's the pity. Am I right? Because that's a page turner right there.
It's a real loss.
Public key infrastructure that's why I wake up in them.
The crazy part is this book's from 2010.
Good
and
on you,
a lot
Hannu.
of these concepts, they're not in the tech zeitgeist until the last 5
They were in Hannu's
years. Well, he did found a think tank.
Wow. This is not a bad book. There are not bad concepts. It's not a dumb book. It just doesn't have the thrust of plot that pulls you through the book.
Right.
Nothing made me turn.
It could be polished a bit more.
Nothing made me want to turn the page and find out what was happening on the next page.
Right.
That was my main criticism. None of the characters were strong enough that they pulled the plot. None of the plot lines were strong enough that they pulled the plot. Action happened, but because I didn't know what was really happening, it felt like it was happening out of the blue. I felt like there was a lot of potential for this world. I can see the work that went into it. I wanted it used better. The thing that I was interested in was the idea of being able to edit someone's memories to the point where you collectively all believe an event existed that didn't exist. And when that reveal happens, you're like, okay. It wasn't like, oh shit. You're like, well, oh, okay. I'm just so generally confused right now.
Yeah, I can see that.
I don't get it. Okay. I'm all right. Does that mean the book's almost over? Like, and then we got to the end when we get to the memory palace, because when he fires the key that has the 9 dignities of God in it, and it wakes up all of these buildings that Paul left behind, and it creates this giant spire. And for a time, there's a civil war going on for like a hot minute. And the phobi almost destroy the planet or destroy the walking city for like maybe 5 minutes, somewhere in that nature. And the ship has to come down and fire at everybody. And then he goes in and he kind of sort of defeats the King of Mars. And then Isidore becomes the new King of Mars. And I was like, okay, that all feels real. I feel like that should be relevant, but at this point, I'm just so lost in a general sense that it didn't hit. Maybe I need to read it again, or I need to read the next couple of books and then go back having already gotten a better sense of the characters.
I don't know that this book would reveal much on a reread. I remember really liking the second book, and the third book was okay.
Okay.
The third book went a little more
techy,
tech jargony again. I guess maybe more physics jargony. But the second book was really good. It takes place on Earth.
Okay.
And we get a lot more backstory.
Okay. I think I would appreciate some backstory. This book needs to be like 30% longer. And all of that time needs to be spent with the characters you actually want me to care about.
Right.
Not Isidore.
Right. You could have really condensed down Isidore's scenes.
You could have eliminated Isidore almost entirely. You need him. Yeah. You need him for certain points. But honestly, the whole thing where like he gets interviewed and he didn't want to be interviewed, and then he's in the paper, and then people are recognizing him.
Right. That could have just been like one paragraph.
That doesn't feel, you're like, oh, why? Although I loved the idea of the newspaper, that the newspaper is the only viable way of sharing information, because everyone's like exo memory doesn't work in like Gevulot. So if you can sneaky get an interview, you can write it up and literally hand out a physical piece of paper.
Right. And using an analog camera.
Yes.
Because the Gevulot literally works at the level behind your perception. So you perceive it, but then the Gevulot is a layer between your sensory organs and your consciousness.
So you could take Polaroid of somebody.
So you can take a Polaroid of somebody.
Yeah.
But what you see with your eyes will get wiped.
Yeah. I thought that was really fascinating. There were these really good kernels of like, you had a really cool world set up here. Because we talk about Melee and her life on the Orc, like in the Orc colony.
Yes.
And how she was in this like really, like she would sing things into existence and she had this really beautiful life. And now she's here and Jean's like, well, why are you here? And she's like, reasons that I won't discuss.
And we get more details about that later.
Okay.
I believe somebody's being held hostage by the Sobernost.
Yeah, the lady that she mentions way at the beginning when she's like floating naked in her spaceship and she has jewels wrapped around her leg.
Do you think that's an homage to Barbarella?
Love. Yeah, let's go with it. I think this book would have benefited from an orgasmatron. Every book would benefit from an orgasmatron. Also, an angel doesn't make love. An angel is love. And she does have wings.
And the next book is called, or the third book is called The Causal Angel.
There you go.
The second book is The Fractal Prince.
This is Barbarella fan fiction, and I think that's probably a good place to end it. I think this book is worth reading. I think if you don't mind made up gobbledygook words, I think this book is probably better for you than it was for me. I think there's some stellar moments in this book. I think I like a character-driven story better than I like a plot-driven story. And if I'm not going to have one, then I at least need to have the other. But I think that there was a lot of really cool ideas. And I think this was a really interesting, what would a future technology look like? What would our world look like if we all become so interconnected that we actually become physically connected, like the Sobernost? And what would happen?
Or the Zoku entanglement.
Yeah, Zoku entangle, and also the Sobernost are all one entity.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And there's this holdout of people who value privacy so greatly. And I think that was all really fascinating. And I think that there were a lot of pieces here that I wish had made a more cohesive whole.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yep. So if you can get through this book, definitely read the second book.
Read 7 books in the meantime, whatever it takes to help you get through this. Just do what you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel's not necessarily a role model.
Yeah. So this episode's late, which means it's coming out after my vacation announcement, but we are on break until October. There's a possibility that we will pop in with a couple of episodes.
I have 3 weeks of vacation in August, so
yeah,
I'm guessing we'll get something.
We're traveling. I just don't want to be committed to a schedule because I don't want to tell you guys we're going to do it and then we don't, like we did with this episode. I don't want to do that 20 times in a row. You know,
it's only a month late.
Yeah, I was reading like a thread, which I thought was really interesting. I'm going to wrap it up after this because like we've talked about this book for way too long. I thought this was really interesting because they were talking about this podcast, and I guess they said something political or did something where it felt like they had immediately lost interest in a podcast that was otherwise their favorite podcast. And somebody commented below and was like, "Yeah, like a good podcast is like your best friend." And I was like, "Oh, that's really interesting." And I think that's what draws me to podcasts in general is the different ways that people interact with them.
Mm-hmm.
Because some people go to them purely for information. And some people, it's like, I want to listen to my friends talk. And I hope you think that we are your friends. And of course, we are your friends and you are our friends. And if you want to keep up with our travels while we are journeying about, you can follow us on Patreon. I'll probably put most of the articles up for free because, I mean, we went to visit some friends and they were like, "How do you monetize this though?" And I was like, "I don't fucking know." Not really, like it's not a priority.
We don't.
It's not.
This is a hobby.
No, I'm here to build a community, and sometimes that means that you don't monetize things right away. And maybe someday, eventually, we'll figure out how this makes money for us. And maybe we don't. I don't know. But in the meantime, go visit us on Patreon. I do already have a lot of things up for free. I need to get better about Patreon, but you know how you get me better about Patreon? You go and join Patreon, and you make me feel like I need to go and update Patreon.
Give Rachel some incentive.
And you can go ahead and go on there and, look at pictures and probably hear me do some write-ups and I don't know, whatever. But go check it out. It's a Strange and Beautiful Network on Patreon. There's always a link in the show notes. Is there a link to our website and to our Instagram handle, Strange and Beautiful Network.
And sometimes those links actually work.
They work now, all the time.
So remember, sometimes the strangest things are the most beautiful too.
So be who you are and love what you love. Until next time, friends.
Bye.